Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and in today's video, we are going to talk about the pros and the cons of selling your house off market. Before we get too far in this video, I want to define what off market means. And when we're talking about off market in real estate, we're talking about a house that is sold that is not listed on the multiple listing service. Now, I'm a real estate agent in Seattle, Washington, and the multiple listing service that we use is called the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. This multiple listing service is a group effort and it takes cooperation from all the different real estate brokerages in the Puget Sound area. And what happens is when I have a listing, I put that listing on the multiple listing service and all the other real estate firms have access to that information. A more recent development in multiple listing service data is the invention of the internet. It's not too recent, but you get the idea. In the past, this data was held in books or on note cards back in the 70s, and now all this information is on the internet. And what happens with that data is it's syndicated out or sent out to these other real estate websites. Some of them are real estate firms, and others are marketing companies. So a company like Redfin.com has a real estate website where you can browse listings, and all real estate companies have those types of websites. That's just one that's more popular and at the front of people's minds. And Redfin.com is a real estate company. Other companies like Zillow.com or Trulia.com are marketing companies. Recently, Zillow became a real estate company so they can show and have direct access to the MLS data feeds. But what happens with those listings and the data is that it's sent out to everyone. There's maximum exposure. When you have a property sell off market, rather than trying to get maximum exposure and have as many eyeballs see this property, real estate agents and buyers, what happens is you end up having only a limited number of people, and usually in an off-market situation, maybe one or two buyers. Usually it's just an arm's length transaction between a buyer and seller. You remove the competition and usually you end up getting a lower sales price. So why would anybody consider selling off market if there was the potential of greater exposure and a higher price by listing their property? I'll give you a few suggestions for why somebody might consider this option. Number one, privacy. People are, in some cases, very private into themselves, and they don't appreciate having lots of buyers and lots of agents walking through their house. I'd say the majority of people aren't concerned about this, or if they are, it's moderately, but some people have a heightened awareness of their privacy and their safety. Sometimes life circumstances get in the way, and this could be a sickness, a disability, or lots of different things that come up in life. And still, other people have a house that's just in terrible condition, and there is no way that they feel like they can get the house ready to market. They don't want pictures, it's not even worthy of photos. Why would I want to put any money into this house? I'm just going to sell it anyway. And in some cases, you would refer to these houses as distressed properties. There are definitely people out there looking to buy properties like this from people who are thinking that they should sell their house off market. And the number one and number two people here are going to be investors and builders. Typically, they're trying to get houses before they come on the market because they know that they're going to get a better price as they jump ahead of the competition, and they're also dealing directly with the seller. So they can usually offer things like a quick close, cash, no hassle, you don't have to make any updates. They can be more flexible and accommodating to the seller. And in a lot of cases, for somebody who feels like maybe they want to protect their privacy, they are in a tough financial situation, there are definitely people that are interested in doing this deal. And so an investor or a house flipper or a builder, somebody that's trying to get the house for a better price, is willing to offer some more favorable terms to a seller to help them feel better about selling their house off market. Now, normally the seller in the situation is leaving money on the table. There's no doubt about it. And usually the seller is aware of that, and the buyer definitely is aware of that. And that's why they're willing to and are trying to jump around the traditional process of listing and buying. Some of the benefits to selling your house off market include maintaining privacy, lower hassle, cash or quicker close, and generally a little bit more flexible terms. You don't have to do any work to the house. And the fifth one here is saving money on real estate commissions or legal fees. And we'll talk a little bit more about this fifth point, but that's typically a focus of any off-market sale or for sale by owner sale. Somebody's thinking about saving some money, and we'll talk about why maybe it's actually a negative in the long run. Now, just as we consider the benefits of selling your house off market, we also need to consider the negatives to selling your house off market. The first negative to selling your house off market is that you don't have as much exposure. When we're marketing your house, and as a real estate professional, one of my jobs is to get your house maximum exposure where it matters most, and that's going to be online. And not only do I want to get you maximum exposure, but I want your house to look the best possible while doing it. Even if you do absolutely nothing to your house, just that fact that you had photos and you got it on the market and it was out on the MLS and it was out online, that's going to be a significant improvement in the amount of exposure and potentially the price than you would have over selling off market. You don't have to do anything. No work required, but you can still put your house on the market. Another negative to selling your house off market is the lack of representation. Most people who sell their house off market or without listing don't have a real estate agent. Now, there are situations where people are able to sell their house off market and they know how to do it and they've done it a bunch. So don't take this as a blanket statement, but in general, most people don't have the skills or ability to effectively negotiate a real estate transaction, navigate the process. They don't understand the property values. They don't know how it works. So a lot of times they are making mistakes throughout the process. Maybe there are contingencies in the contract or terms in the contract that they're not aware of that are negative for them, but they don't know. They don't have any representation. And the other part of that is in the negotiations, they're having to do the negotiating themselves. And without as much knowledge about the process and as much knowledge about the market, they might be leaving money on the table or taking a lower offer than they needed. That brings me to the third negative of selling your house off market, and that is a lower sales price. Historically speaking, and according to National Association of Realtors data, a home that sells off market or for sale by owner is going to historically and statistically sell for less than a house that's sold on market. This brings me to the fourth and final negative or con in this video, at least, for selling your house off market, and that is a potentially lower net proceeds. When you think of business or you think of any transaction, you think of how much money did I bring in and how much did I spend. So that could be a profit and loss, or in real estate, we talk about estimated net proceeds. And a lot of times people focus on the expenses on the selling side. They think, okay, I want this to be the commission, or I want to save a little bit of money on commissions, or I don't want to pay commissions. But then they forget to focus on that top number. How much money am I going to bring in? And at some point, there's a point where it makes sense to have an agent and have commissions and fees, and maybe even pay higher commissions and fees because you are going to get a greater benefit in the sales price. And if the sales price with the fees subtracted gets you a larger net profit, it seems like that would be the better option, at least to me. And so some people fixate on the fees, but they don't think about, okay, what am I getting in return for that? And am I going to get more by spending a little bit more? And that's ultimately a decision a seller has to make, and there's no guarantees. But what I've found, even recently, I've had houses sell. I've had 2 houses sell in the last month for over 30% above the asking price. I can't really take a lot of credit for it, and I won't. But I think it's a good example of just what happens when you get your house on the market. 11 offers, over 30% above the asking price. 5 offers, over 30% above the asking price. 2 different situations, 2 completely different cities, similar real estate market, but I think it illustrates the fact that when you have maximum exposure, you're going to get a higher sales price. And in those cases, the amount over the asking price more than paid for any real estate commissions or any closing costs at all. Taxes and insurances, anything. By the time it was all said and done, they put a lot more money in their pocket. And in one instance, the seller told me they were considering and would have considered taking an offer off market for about $150,000 less than what they ended up getting. Just because it was easier, it was cash, it was guaranteed, it was still way more than they expected, but they got even more than way more than they expected by listing their property and having an offer review date. Although I think in general it makes more sense to list your house and sell it on market, there are certainly some situations where it might make more sense to sell your house off market. And that might include selling to family or friends, or maybe you have an agent or an attorney draft up the paperwork, but they're not as involved and the fees would be significantly less. You might have a situation where maybe you're in financial trouble or legal trouble, or you have a desire to sell quickly and get that money quickly. Well, in that case, it might make sense to sell your house off market to a cash investor, have a quick close, and not have to deal with it. You also might have a distressed property and it's just a headache for you and nobody's going to be able to buy it anyway. And in some situations, you can't finance a property. It just needs to be a cash transaction. I've still found though, if you find yourself in that situation, you can usually get more money and still list the property, and you're gonna have a bunch of bidders versus just one person that's willing to buy your house off market. All right, we just covered a lot in this video as we considered the benefits and the negatives of selling your house off market. Now again, my general opinion is that it makes sense to sell your house on market, but I completely understand that there are situations where people might consider an off-market sale. I hope that this information was helpful for you though, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I know you got some value out of it, so I have a couple favors to ask. Number one, please give this video a thumbs up. And number two, if you know somebody who could benefit from this content, please consider sharing it with them.